Hi everyone, welcome to Bring the Heat by the Corning Museum of Glass Hot Glass team. My name is Chris Rochelle, and today I'll be making a sculptural form that's been inspired by nature. To start this piece, we needed to prepare a little bit of color on the end of a blowpipe. I'm working with an opal yellow. That was the base foundation, and now I'm starting to build up some gathers of our molten clear glass. And in our furnace, we keep our glass at about 2000 degrees. It's pretty much like table honey in consistency. This requires building something in multiple gathers. So you can see me going back in for the final gather for the base of the vessel right here. And for this particular piece, I'm drawing inspiration from a few different natural formations. And the first one we're going to see getting put together here is a rock formation that actually becomes the bottom of the main vessel. Glass is really nice at lending itself to texturing very rapidly. And a great tool that we use in our hot shop to help us with that is what we call the hot torch. So we have furnaces that we use to reheat and resoften glass, but this torch is a really nice addition. Here we can see me flattening the very bottom, and you can see a good amount of clear glass, a lot of mass that I haven't actually blown. There is a bubble there, but a lot of that mass is important to be the weight for the bottom of the piece. I did a lot of pre-work too to make some of these components. We're making use of a garage that we're going to see later on in this video. But these are little chunks of clear glass that I formed, the same type of rock pattern. They were sitting in the garage ready to go. We pull several of them out one by one using a hot torch to attach them. The teamwork that goes into a piece like this is critical, and everybody's job is just as important to make sure that everything is a success when it comes together in the end. The whole time we're working on something, the piece also needs to maintain enough temperature so nothing gets too cold. Glass will crack if you let it cool too much as you're working. So we can use torches like this fluffy torch to help us, but also you see Katie here taking a series of reheats throughout the process as well. Now to create the colors for the outside of the piece and the rocks in particular, this is colored powder. This is a smoky gray color. It's a very dark transparent. But what I really like about powdering, especially for natural forms, is that if you don't melt it in entirely, you keep kind of a more organic feel to it. You can see a bit of texture that's left behind. Once all the powder was on there and the colors were just right, I'm making sure the very bottom is flat with a little concave section. This is because we're about to attach a finishing handle called a punty to the very base. And when we break the punty free in the very end, I want to make sure the punty doesn't disrupt the way the piece sits. You can see us using compressed air from time to time, that little air gun I was holding on to, just to stiffen the glass quickly if we need to. But here's our punty. This is the final handle for the whole piece, and this is a pretty good sized one because we're going to end up working on this piece for a little bit of time after this and adding some components which will add more weight to it. So you want to make sure the punty is substantial enough. But a transfer allows us to create the opening of the vessel, the bubble. And now I'm doing my best to really just soften the top portion, the hollow portion of this. A little more inflation just to thin things out, and then I begin the process of stretching the opening wider into the final bowl shape. One of the challenges I experienced with this, you can kind of see in the image here, is that after I sculpted all the rock detail with that final gather I took, it did pinch the bubble a little bit, so I have a pretty significant dip in the very bottom section of the bowl, which created some technical challenges, but I was able to work through it and still make a vessel that I liked. Our reheating chambers are running at about 2,100 degrees. These are empty ovens, and that's just what we use to work on whatever piece we're working on. A really fantastic tool for vessel making. You just saw a quick shot of me using it as a pad of folded up wet newspaper. And once the shape is complete, just a little bit more compressed air to stiffen things, expediting the process and getting the glass rigid again. I'm done forming it. But you're going to see me make use of powder again. we have a powder booth that we use for this. The colored powder is very fine particulate, and when we're sifting it on a form, it does get airborne very quickly, and you don't want that to get all over the place, and you certainly don't want to breathe it in. So our powder booth right behind the shot there has a nice filtration system with a HEPA filter. So we turn that vacuum on when we're sifting powder. All the excess goes into that filtration, keeps us safe. But this is a nice pink, I think it's a gold ruby powder that I'm dusting on the inside of the bowl. And only so much will stick, and you really have to time it, especially when a piece is thinner, getting the heat just right to get that powder to adhere to it. There is a certain amount of excess that won't stick, so we dump that out just to not waste it. But you saw me earlier using a hot torch just to heat up that interior surface to get the powder to stick properly. It can be a delicate balance when you have a thinner form to not overheat it, trying to apply powder without losing your form. So at this point, I'm waiting on Katie to create the next component, which is going to be a green vine, and she's prepping that. She's got some of that green color on there. She's dipped it into an optic mold, which creates a nice ribbed texture. Molds we use quite frequently for a lot of vessels, but in this case to make a nice vine pattern. And this can be a tricky move because you can't keep the base away from the heat too long because you don't want it to get too cold, but when you put that vine on, you need it to be plenty hot so you can attach it and move it. But I have to take a couple quick reheats here, and that vine, as it's moving around, can be tricky to kind of wrangle in and keep from tagging back onto the side of the form. So a little compressed air again can be useful to stiffen things up. So again, did quite a bit of prep work for this piece, and there are several items that right now are sitting in a couple different ovens. We saw some of the rocks come out earlier. I pre-made some leaves for this form, a really nice flower, sort of a tropical looking flower. And I also made a second very smaller vessel that has a similar look to the bottom one, but this time the texture I put on the smaller vessel, we'll see in a moment, is a root-like pattern. And this piece overall really draws on a few different pieces I've made throughout the past probably 10 years. Our team here at the Corning Museum of Glass works on a lot of different projects throughout the year, and one of the first ones that I'm making use of the texture here was actually a cider glass that I made a tree-like texture on the vessel. And so this piece I've just pulled out of an oven has that sort of root-like pattern on there. But I've pulled it out of a little pickup oven on a punty. That punty, break-free, Catherine taps it off into a pair of warmed-up Kevlar gloves. This is where the teamwork really is dynamic, and everybody has a very specific job to do in terms of timing, and Katie was just torching the very tip of the stem. Catherine was managing the dish, allowing me to basically focus on what I needed to do. So you really do rely on your team, and it's critical that everybody's on it, and they just really nailed it for this piece. So at this point, I'm warming over very specific areas, but I'm basically balancing the temperatures. Once that dish went onto the vine, it was a really hot, soft connection, making it nice and stable and strong. But I had to balance the temperatures and stabilize everything. Here we can see the second of a series of leaves that I pre-sculpted coming out of the garage. And the garage is an oven that's just babysitting the components I pre-made. It's holding around 1,000 degrees, keeps them at just the right temperature, lets us pull them out when we need them. But another really good use for this hot torch, allows you to just really heat those small areas of contact so you get a nice strong connection without having to overheat everything else. If there's a little bit of movement in everything, that's actually a safety net, as I like to say. It lets you know that the glass isn't too cold. You're away from that thermal shock range. But we still kind of flip the piece back and forth to make sure it keeps the centered point that we've established. That was a good shot of Catherine, and Catherine's job here really just to pull those pieces out delicately from the garage. She's using a warmed up shovel to do that, bringing them out one by one. Another thing that we do when we're working pieces like this is preheat the metal tools. You see me using these tweezers and crimps And I preheat them each time, as you can see right here, before grabbing a 1,000-degree piece of glass. If you have cold metal, you'll crack the piece very quickly. But I've used a lot of powder for most of these details, the stem included, the leaves. The flower has, I think, 3 different colors on there. And then the final, the topper for this is a little stamen for the flower that I created using some bright yellows and reds. And that's a pretty delicate component. It's pretty thin, and definitely want to make sure that the form has balanced heat all the way throughout, so when you put the little thin stamen on there, you don't have to worry about taking too many long heats on anything and lose the details in it. And I know it doesn't look like it right here, but the little toppers to that stamen are a bright coral red, or more like a very opaque cherry red. But the opal yellows and reds just always look really dark when they're still 1,000 degrees. A little bit of water on the punny. This will shock that connection. Jesse's there standing by, ready to grab it in case it pops off early. Often we'll fire polish the bottoms of our pieces because that break is sharp. So a little torch to soften that edge, and away the piece goes. But it was a lot of fun. The team dynamic was fantastic. Everybody really just nailed their job, and I couldn't have been more pleased with how it turned out. Well, thanks for watching. This has been the Bring the Heat breakdown with Chris, and you can actually see the full video of the process of this piece being made on our YouTube channel.